Welcome to part 2 of our Ultron lore deep dive. If you guys haven't seen part 1, that should be in the playlist linked in the description. And if you haven't already, go and check out Pastra's channel. This video has been incredibly entertaining so far, and you should definitely go support them before watching this video. Alright dudes, let's get right back into it.
Ultron Imperative is the direct continuation of Ultron Unlimited, which follows up on this loose thread. In this story, we see Alchema facing off against the Avengers with an army of robots she created using the brain patterns she collected, creating strange Frankenstein's monster hybrids out of them. Alongside this new species, she created an even more advanced mechanical race with minds so incredibly complex they may as well have actually been human. The Avengers fight for some time against these machines, with Alchema seemingly having the upper hand until eventually something strange happens. A familiar voice echoes out from within the cave they all find themselves in, who reveals himself to be none other than Ultron.
It's me! I'm back from the dead, baby! So how did he come back? Was it just the residual data left in all of these clones of him? I guess kind of collected into his consciousness?
Built by the metal army Alchema had created. Now, why would Ultron be brought back, you must wonder? Alchema hated Ultron, and the new race of robots were her creations, so naturally, they should hate him too. Well, you see, in this story, it's revealed that every single one of Ultron's creations are designed with a secret imperative built into them. The imperative to rebuild their creator in the event of his death.
Considering
Genius.
The amount of time Ultron probably has to think about all these things, I'm sure he would have thought of this particular scenario happening. And he giving himself immortality with just like one line of code is probably a good thing to do if you want to take over the world and all that. So yeah, makes sense.
Alchema, without even knowing it, was creating an army that would serve Ultron and that would rebuild Ultron because of this imperative, the Ultron Imperative. A final fight breaks out where Alchema reveals that in the event of her death, all of her creations are designed to explode, and in a
No! Oh, damn it. So what do? You can't take out Alchema. Or do you have to, like, shut down Alchema without taking her down?
Or just explode her. So just take it.
Just tank the explosion to the face.
Magic scene, we see Hawkeye forced to see his wife die a second time when he has to shoot her with an arrow made of the same Antarctic vibranium that had killed Ultron before.
I wonder if this Antarctic vibranium is like the inspiration for the thing he currently has, the power of Luna Snow. I don't know, but it's Antarctic. It's icy.
I don't know, but can we stop buffing Hawkeye, please?
He pulls through, Alchema is destroyed, and seemingly so is Ultron, at least for now.
Seemingly.
In typical comic and Ultron fashion, the story ends with us seeing a lone surviving drone carrying around a living Ultron's head.
Never mind, it's a drone. Bro looked like a gray alien.
Moving on from this story, the next one I want to talk about is the highly important, albeit very strange, Ultron Initiative. This story was what opened the Mighty Avengers run of comics, with Ultron taking over the body of Tony Stark and transforming into a naked human woman.
Interesting.
I see only wins from this one. Ultron might just be my favorite Marvel villain.
Yeah, I'm gonna keep it a stack with all of you. I do not like this story very much.
Well,
Ultron Initiative feels like the writers wanted to be super experimental with an Ultron story, taking the character in a new direction, but the new direction was really weird and required what I view as quite a bit of a mischaracterization to even happen. You see, the reason why Ultron looks like this in the story is because of Tony Stark's own mechanical implants, which Ultron took control of. They merged Stark's flesh with machine and became a humanoid hybrid as a result. Why did Ultron take the form of a human woman, you ask? Because this new body is supposed to resemble Janet Van Dyne, which is... Huh?
But yeah, I see what Pastra is coming from. Because, like, his whole thing was Hank Pym and his insecurities made manifest. I don't think Hank really had a desire to become a woman. He wanted to be accepted as a man. And he also wanted to be a drunken cowboy. So that's a desire that all men kind of have deep down. I understand, Hank. It's okay.
That's the real missed opportunity here. He should have become the drunken cowboy.
Yeah, true.
Story only just begins with this twist, and already I have so many questions. The main one being why Ultron would want to take on the form of Janet. In the story, the only explanation is because Ultron loves Janet, but we've clearly established in multiple other stories that this love for Janet is romantic as a result of Hank's brain patterns.
So why do you want to become her?
Why does Ultron now want to become her? I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm just not understanding what they were going for here, but it just doesn't line.
Ultron wanted to learn how to love himself, okay? So he became the thing that he loved. Yeah. Doing some gymnastics here, just warming up. Don't worry, guys. I got you. Writers, if you can't figure out your story, I'll figure it out for you. Just DM me.
Yeah.
Line up to me at all. Either way, as the story continues, we see that Ultron's newest plan
God damn! Okay, moving on.
for human extinction involves hacking into multiple experimental weather-altering...
Also, wait, I just noticed, is that Ben? Is that the thing? Is bro knocked out there? Right here? This poor guy. No? Okay. It kind of looked like it.
No.
It's just a random monster. Gotcha. Bro's like, oh.
Damn. Mistaken random monster for Ben. Feels bad.
Sorry, Ben. He's... You know what? Whatever I say here is just going to make me look like an awful person, so I'm going to just move on.
Satellites created by Tony Stark and using them to create mass destruction across the planet that will bring about global extinction. When that plan fails, Ultron instead decides to hack into the world's supply of nuclear missiles, launching them all at once.
The only way to stop missiles.
Oh wait, this comic wasn't written by the guy with the poorly disguised fetish, right? Of like changing characters' genders. So. Okay.
The X-Men writer? No, I don't think so.
Okay, gotcha. Because I mean, I feel like this is kind of in his ballpark. Like, even if it didn't make any sense.
Yeah, when it comes down to it, the reason Ultron became Janet is just because they wanted to draw him as a hot lady. Woman. Let's be honest. Yeah.
And I, for one, would gladly buy the skin if Marvel Rivals made this. I'm just saying. Just throwing it out there.
This plan is to get the help of Hank Pym, who creates a virus that is designed to be delivered into Ultron by Ares using the Pym particles.
Yeah, I was gonna say, that did not look like Hank Pym. Bro, like, went to the gym.
Yeah.
But it makes a lot more sense if that's the god Ares, right? I think... Yeah, all those gods should be a part of the actual story, too. I think DC also has a similar situation. I mean, they have Thor, so...
a lot of the different gods.
Yeah.
I can start another side tangent here. Another reason I really don't like this story is just how unnecessarily cruel practically every character is towards Hank. Like, I get it. Hank has done some really bad shit throughout his comic history.
He did indeed
but the
tell a
way
woman to
these
shut up.
characters think and talk about him throughout this story just felt so uncharacteristically cold-hearted. Like, there is straight up a point where Miss Marvel asks him if he can do something.
What?
God damn.
Is that...
What?
Huh? What did you say? Honestly, I would expect something like this to come from Milk, not Miss Marvel, of all people, but...
Milk.
And I say this in a loving way, okay? Milk's gamer toxicity is just kind of funny. But in the comic, poor Hank, man. Guys, he needs help. He doesn't need to be told this. These people. They're the superheroes that we look up to. This is not it, man.
Well, you know, I don't think I've ever looked up to her, but...
Well, they're supposed to be that, but yeah. In practice... Not so
something
much.
to stop Ultron, and then thinks to herself about how if he can't, she just wants him to straight up kill himself.
Okay, so
there's
she didn't
another
say
moment
that
that just
loud.
doesn't
Okay.
sit with me well after 2, where S.H.I.E.L.D. is talking about getting Mr. Fantastic to help, and when Hank tries telling them that he is a better choice for this than Reed because of his area of expertise, Janet just randomly says that he shouldn't be gloating about his intelligence as the creator of Ultron, which, like, why would she say that?
His wife, his own wife, the one who helped support him throughout the entire process of him confessing that he made Ultron with his own mind, is now telling him off for doing so. Nunny?
And also, don't brag. You made Ultron, bitch.
I never should have married you. God damn, poor Hank. I don't know. Maybe the person who wrote this comic just doesn't like Hank. Which, I mean...
Yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty evident, yeah.
Regardless, though, it's just... It doesn't make for such a great story now, does it?
Like, okay, first of all,
At least we
he
get to
wasn't
see
even
Ultron
gloating,
booty.
just genuinely trying to help. And second of all, I feel like Janet would just never say this.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, her and Hank have an absolute mess of a relationship, but one thing about Janet is that she wouldn't just torment him like this about being the guy that created Ultron.
Bro, she stuck with him through thick and thin. Even after he hit her. She was so understanding of that, to still be there for him at that final moment where he finally killed Ultron. Well, quote unquote did. But yeah, to suddenly turn around and do this makes no sense. At least in my opinion. Who knows? Human beings are complicated.
She may not like Hank after everything he put her through, but this feels so oddly sadistic, and I just did not like seeing her written this way. Anyways, angry tangent aside, Hank's plan ends up working and the virus is delivered into Ultron's system, resulting in the mechanical bits separating from Tony Stark. Ultron's disembodied consciousness is then sent into space, while a small bit of him seemingly remains on Earth to cause future issues.
I'm here in this PC now.
Ultron's story would properly continue in the massive Marvel event Annihilation Conquest, a continuation of the Annihilation storyline and the proper introduction to what would become the modern depiction of the Guardians of the Galaxy.
Hey.
I think it is worth bringing this story up, both because of the interesting developments it brings to Ultron's character, and more importantly, this is one of the single coolest versions of him to ever be made. This Ultron is awesome, like beyond awesome. In Annihilation Conquest, we basically learn that after the events of the Ultron Initiative, Ultron's consciousness floated through space until eventually being discovered by this biomechanical race called the Phalanx. Now, the Phalanx whole deal is the assimilation of technology. They get their hands on whatever floats by and make it a part of themselves as a way to build and evolve. When they try to do the same with Ultron,
Lucky
the
Ultron,
opposite ends up happening.
Yeah, well, perfect for Ultron. I'm 100% certain this race was made by the Celestials. Like, it has to be.
Yeah.
Ultron's unbreakable will and stronger personality ends up controlling the entire Phalanx species, and
He's
before
just
you know
built
it, he rebuilds their entire race
Very
in
much
his
so, yeah.
image and begins using them as his personal army to conquer the universe and destroy all flawed organic life. From here, the story becomes a post-apocalyptic tale of a small rebellion fighting against a near unstoppable force. And oh my god, do they do it well. Ultron in this story is the most menacing he has ever been. When he first makes his entrance in the story, he does so by walking into the home of the High Evolutionary, murdering Moondragon, one of the main characters of the event, and then proceeds to wave to Adam Warlock with the same hand he killed her with, still covered in her fresh blood.
Damn. I wish this was something you could actually do in Marvel Rivals. And then just gloat at the Adam Warlock, like, ha, your E was off cooldown.
And if you thought that wasn't menacing enough, my man the High Evolutionary decides the only way to get rid of Ultron here is to blow up a fucking star in front of him, an act that merely pisses him off enough that he decides to vent his rage by torturing a captured Star-Lord. This Ultron is a menace, an absolutely terrifying menace, and I live for every panel that he is present. Now, aside from his galactic conquest and having more aura than any human could possibly hope to imagine in their lifespan, this version of Ultron does actually have another plan that isn't like anything we've seen up to this point, but might sound familiar to those of you who know about his character in the MCU. You see, at one point in the story, we actually see a flashback of Ultron talking to Hank Pym, where he attempts to rationalize the thought process of his own creation. And in this flashback, we learn that one of Ultron's reasons for hating humanity and natural life is the inherent flaw he sees in evolution. The process of slowly improving and adapting over time as a species, maintaining biological flaws along the way, as opposed to a specifically designed species that lacks those inherent flaws. Ultron wants to replace organic life with robotic life because he believes that in doing so he is creating superior life. Now flash forward to his conquest.
Superior Iron Man.
You know, there's been quite a few superiors throughout the comics, and most of them are pretty flawed individuals.
Apparently they weren't very superior at the end of the day, you could say. You would reach this conclusion if you lack that human part of you. And Ultron inherently just isn't, despite being made from a human. It's just a logical conclusion. Which is why we have so many of these like franchises, sci-fi franchises, where robots take over and humans have to fight their own creation. Thankfully, they're kind of relegated to making art at the moment, so we still got a few years.
Of the universe and his discovery of one Adam Warlock. For those of you unfamiliar with Adam...
Oh yeah, and Adam Warlock is like the perfect being, right? That's his whole lore, essentially. But he's also organic, right? Then that kind of goes against Ultron's whole thing about evolution.
Warlock. This guy is one of the most powerful characters in all of Marvel. Adam is basically a perfect human being who is slowly constructed piece by piece to be perfection incarnate by his creators, and made even better when he was discovered by the High Evolutionary. When Ultron learned about this guy, he saw an opportunity to create his perfect artificially created species in him. And so, in the climax of Annihilation Conquest, with the help of the High Evolutionary, Ultron ends up stealing the body of Adam Warlock and ends up wreaking havoc in it. Like, this guy gets his new form, and Frame 1 puts Mantis into a coma with a single backhand. I love this Ultron so much.
Damn, Mantis got backhanded. Sit down! God. Yeah, I could only imagine the devastation that will be wrought about this universe now. And okay, that wasn't really where I thought it was going to go. I thought it was going to be like contradictory to his beliefs. But no, he was like, hey, that's perfection. Give me that.
No, yeah, he's just trying to take it for himself.
Yeah. I should have thought more selfishly. I'm sorry, Ultron.
But he's so cool. Why is he so cool? The rebellion that fights against him only gets close to even ground once Nova enters the battle with the original creator of the Phalanx, who fights Ultron and Adam's...
I don't know anything about Nova except for the fact that he's really good at neutral in Marvel vs. Capcom 3. That's it. Who even is Nova? I don't know, but he's good at a fighting game.
There's several Novas. My favorite is Sam. I don't know which one this is.
Gotcha.
The design made it look more like Sam, but...
body with the help of Nova and Quasar until eventually they're able to get Adam back in control again. But even after that, with Ultron's plans to use Adam thrown out the window, he still has one ace up his sleeve. He manages to take control of an entire army of Kree sentries who he fuses all together to create a giant kaiju-sized body for himself, which he uses in one final battle.
This is such a classic move. Let's amass everybody into one giant kaiju and have one final epic battle. I guess it just works thematically for raising the stakes.
There's nothing cooler than having a giant monster fight.
Very true. I mean, kaiju battles, kaiju movies, even till today, are like incredibly popular. Even if some of them like don't have the greatest story out there, people will still watch because it's just really cool.
It's a spectacle.
Unless if you're Pacific Rim 2, which doesn't exist. That wasn't a spectacle.
Oh.
He's so fucking cool. Why is he so cool, dude? Unfortunately, though, all good things come to an end, and Ultron is finally defeated by
I love how Pastra describes it as all good things come to an end, but Ultron gets defeated. No. Ultron, no. It's amazing, though, when you can get a villain that the audience is also cheering for, despite knowing that their thought process is kind of incorrect and wrong, but they're just that cool. They just have that much aura and charisma that you're like, yeah, everybody loves them. Some of the greatest villains out there are of this sort of type. I mean, look at Dio. Everybody freaking hates Dio and knows that what Dio is doing is wrong, but you kind of love him. Because he's just such a shithead.
That's why I think is so fun with Ultron too, because it's like so many villains. I think people think in order to write a villain that people like, that they have to be redeemable.
Yeah, no.
I would not define Ultron as redeemable.
No, he's not.
He is a villain through and through.
Mm-hmm.
He can have sympathetic aspects to his character, but he is
Very
a
much
villain.
so.
And you just love to see him do villain things.
Yep. It's not the fact that they're redeemable. It's the fact that they're charismatic and that you can enjoy their character for what they're doing, despite knowing that it's wrong and the story presenting it as wrong. That's just hard to achieve, though. Like, I don't know where I would even begin. I just try to, like, take traits from some of the popular villains and hopefully mix and match it into something that makes sense and maybe somebody likes.
What villains would you draw from?
Definitely some Dio. You definitely have to get some Dio in there. I'll add Ultron because he's currently on my mind at the moment. And a little bit of Dr. Doofenshmirtz. Just to make him my own blend of mad scientist, you know?
I like it.
The greatest villain of them all.
The combined powers of Quasar and Nova, who destroy his prime body once and for all and disconnect him from the Phalanx hive mind, saving the galaxy. And so ends an awesome story and an awesome Ultron. This particular storyline holds a special place in my heart for being both the first comic event I have ever read in its entirety, as well as it actually being what properly introduced me to comic Ultron in the first place. It was while reading this story initially so I could see the Guardians of the Galaxy in action that I quickly latched onto Ultron instead, being so fascinated by this awesome character that it inspired me to look more into his comic history. So, in a way, you have this comic to thank for this titan of a video. And just in case you were worried we'd hit a low point after such an awesome Ultron, you will be happily surprised because the next storyline I want to talk about is possibly Ultron's most iconic one ever created, Age of Ultron. Age of Ultron is an interesting case because I imagine when I say that name, you think of the MCU film.
I did not. I definitely didn't think of the movie. You have no evidence to suggest that.
It just got read like a book.
Now that is aside from the title and the villain each story is about, comic Age of Ultron and movie Age of Ultron have quite literally nothing in common. Comic Age of Ultron is a post-apocalyptic story set on Earth with almost all of humanity already wiped out and a small resistance force of heroes still present who are barely even surviving.
So, in this picture, you can see all of the tank mains gathering to try and figure out what they're going to do in this Marvel Rival season. It is truly the Age of Ultron.
Looking up at all the flyers.
Poor guy. Like, any thing mains out there, I feel so sorry for you. You are literally just helpless against those flyers. Yeah, just swap at that point. Even Hulk. Hulk can take down flyers, but it's very inconsistent. It's still pretty buggy. So
when there's so many of them on the other team.
Yeah.
And Annihilation Conquest, Ultron had returned to Earth after his defeat, now evolved to a point far beyond what any heroes could defeat. He quickly took over the world, building an army of golden sentries to finally enact his plans of human extinction.
Of course, they're all made of gold.
When it comes to Age of Ultron, I find that this story is a great storyline in general, but not really the best Ultron story, if that makes sense. Like, Ultron is a fantastic threat here that allows us to see many of our favorite heroes put up against impossible odds, but he isn't really a character. He's more of a looming presence throughout the story. That doesn't stop him from being incredibly cool, though, because some of the stuff he has done throughout Age of Ultron is legitimately pretty scary. See, part of the reason Ultron is such a threat here is because the Avengers quickly learn that he isn't actually present in their current timeline. Instead, Ultron found a way to travel to the future using a mutilated, brainwashed Vision as a conduit by which he observes the present. This disturbing revelation is what leads us to the main overarching plot of Age of Ultron, time travel. What little heroes are left band together, traveling into the future to fight Ultron Prime, while Wolverine attempts to sneak into the past to seek his own solution to the conflict, murdering Hank Pym before he even gets the opportunity to make Ultron.
Why is Hank so... I was going to say, why is Hank so big? And then I was
He's
like,
Ant-Man,
you know what?
yeah.
That's actually a stupid question.
No, this is just Wolverine's comic book accurate size. It all goes back to that age-old question, you know? Would you kill the villain when they were a baby? Before they actually did the evil thing? I suppose when it comes to Wolverine, he's hardcore enough to not really care too much about that. He's probably going to be tortured by it for the rest of his life, but it's like, it's just another scar on his back. He can live with it. Then again, I have to consider the circumstances here too. Like, the whole world is basically dead. There's just a few people left alive, and this is an act of desperation. So I can understand it, but I also feel so sorry for Hank. He just needs help, and yet these people are coming to kill him for something he hasn't even done yet. Bruh.
He ends up getting followed by Sue Storm, who tries to stop him, but ultimately fails and allows Hank to be murdered. Here is where things...
Hank dies? Sue, no! You're the greatest counter against Wolverine! How could you fail? Oh, man.
Things get interesting, though, because you'd think that by doing that, they'd save the day. But in true time travel plot fashion, instead of fixing everything, all murdering Hank Pym did was create an even worse future than the one where Ultron took over the world.
The butterfly effect. You don't know what this change will do. I wonder, then, how are we going to spin this? Who creates Ultron? Iron Man this time around? Is that what we're going for?
Like, we're talking about a dystopian world here. Tony Stark looks like a zombie after...
What the frick happened to Tony? God damn! Who wants to tell their Uncle Tony exactly what's going on around here? You are not my uncle, and I don't want to tell you anything. What happened, bro?
Zombie after being ripped in half. The Avengers are barely held together, and by the time Logan and Sue see the damage they've done, Morgan Le Fay shows up to quite literally destroy everyone. So, of course...
Who's Morgan Le Fay?
Ultron, just other worse problems.
Gotcha. Maybe it's the kind of scenario where if you don't have the villain, then everybody just kind of does their own thing. And so they become even worse than the original villain.
Logan goes back in time to stop his past self from killing Hank. It's convoluted.
My favorite, yes.
Oh, man. That's great. I love, like, time travel stories so much. Steins Gate is one of my favorite anime out there. I mean, who could have guessed, seeing as the mad scientist persona and all that? The way that time travel is done can be so fun, so intriguing, so just mind-destroying. The ramifications of all your actions. You'll never know what's going to happen.
My favorite thing is seeing people play VLR for the first time and getting the twist at the end of just the entire timeline scenario.
Yep. Just sit there and process it. Either
just
that or
watching
they're
the
just...
gears turn as they piece together exactly how it happened.
And learning how time travel works in each series is it's kind of interesting. Like, what kind of take is this writer going to have on the whole time travel thing? Like, and from a different series, Wolverine should not be able to meet other Wolverine, or else that would create a time paradox. Oh, but in this one, you know, it's fine. It works. We'll go with it.
No. And eventually they managed to create a plan to stop Hank from being murdered while also stopping Age of Ultron from being able to happen. A virus deeply coded into Ultron's brain, one that would only be triggered once he attempted to bring about the events of Age of Ultron.
Actually, why didn't we think of this first? Why couldn't we just go back into the past and tell Hank not to do it, or to like make a safety measure for it? That probably would have been better than just straight up killing him without telling him anything.
I mean, we did send Wolverine.
Yeah, we sent Wolverine, of all people. Should have just sent Sue on her own.
He's known for his good communication skills.
Not a moment sooner and not a moment later. This plan ends up working, and Ultron is destroyed, saving the present timeline from complete destruction. Now, I would say this is where our story ends, but in actuality, there is an issue after this, an epilogue that is entirely focused on Hank Pym, and I really want to talk about it, because this single issue story ended up impacting me far more than I ever expected it would. The epilogue opens with Hank all alone after the events of the story have already happened, seemingly on the verge of another intense mental breakdown. He sits against a wall, with the panel slowly panning out to reveal that he shrunk himself to a small enough size that nobody can find him. He talks to the reader through an internal monologue where he thinks back through his life and everything he'd done, trying to imagine how he would ever get to the point where he'd create the thing that at one point truly destroyed the world. And it's through this internal monologue that we learn of Hank's life, how he grew up as a natural prodigy who had ambition and imagination, someone who wanted to express himself through his creations and who wanted to use his scientific talents for fun. His parents never saw him for that, though, always pushing him down a more practical path. The only one who truly supported his endeavors was his grandmother, who passed away when he was still very young. Without her in his life, Hank's creativity that once defined him was lost over time, his drive to express himself lost as he moved his way into scientific studies. One day, though, he'd had enough. He wanted to be that kid who created goofy inventions again, and in a spur-of-the-moment decision, ended up discovering the Pym particles that would create his career. Hank's greatest achievement, discovered once he decided for the first time in years to spread his wings and be true to himself. It wouldn't be long before he'd be inspired further by the superheroes of the world to put his invention to good use too, becoming the first Ant-Man and living the life of the hero. Little did he realize, though, how the pressure of this new life would eventually weigh down on him and push him back in that direction he originally acted out against. Becoming an Avenger, Hank became insecure. He wanted to prove himself to everyone, to prove he deserved his place among the Earth's mightiest heroes, and so he regressed back to the mindset his parents forced on him. He threw aside everything he'd wanted for what he thought was the greater good, and ended up creating Ultron as a result. His greatest failure brought into the world when he stopped being true to himself. And everything else is history. Just when it seems, though, that Hank is about to snap for perhaps the very last time, he suddenly has a revelation. Back when Wolverine decided to kill him to create a better timeline, it didn't work. His death...
Oh my god. Oh, this poor guy. I'm glad that
so much he had to take it.
Yeah. I couldn't really say anything during that moment because, like, damn, that's so real, too. There's so many people out there who could probably relate to that exact thing. Certainly in different capacities, but we've all been snubbed by people in our life to be things that we don't want to be, whether that be society or just our parents or friends. It's
moments like that in Marvel Comics that make me love Marvel Comics, because I feel like with all the characters, there's always such grounding elements to them. Sometimes it's few and far between,
Yeah.
but those scenes are my favorites.
It is a shame that they are few and far between, because this gives Hank's story so much more meaning. And that's why in the first part, I love the fact that he was the one that created Ultron. That whole character arc, that it was tied directly to him. It was so deeply personal, not just towards the Avengers, but to him as an individual, made it so much more impactful. For human beings, it's really hard to relate to the mass destruction of so many people, because it's hard to comprehend that number and that much suffering. But when it is one man who is being tormented by his own past, his own decisions, basically by himself, he is torturing himself.
Yeah.
It's it is deeply personal, deeply relatable, something that we all have to get through in our lives. So yeah. That's why Ultron is just Ultron's been doing great work, making people really think about themselves and also killing them at the same time. But if they survive, then they might become better. I hope Hank learned something from this. It is really sad that the only consolation that he has is the fact that because he died and was killed, the world became a worse place. But then I suppose, that just means that your future is at least guaranteed to be more positive than whatever that was. And maybe that's
true,
enough. Yeah. That's enough to keep you going. Man, this is awesome. I can understand now why Hank Pym is like Pastra's favorite superhero. He's got a lot to him. And I can also understand why people would dislike him a lot. He's also got a lot to dislike about him.
But it's like, unfortunately, while there's moments like this that are really good and really characterize Hank, most of the time when you see him, he's just kind of an asshole.
I suppose that just goes back to the real world. It depends on the writer who's working on him.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
The potential of the character is here. It just really needs the right writer to be working on his character for this to show up, for this to happen.
Yeah, very much so. But it's like, I would say similar things with like characters like Sentry, where it's like, when you have there's a handful of writers who write Sentry really, really well. And then a lot of people who use them just as this like blanket Deus Ex Machina that's just boring and uninteresting.
Yeah, we'll have to learn about Sentry at some point. I still haven't seen Thunderbolts. I'm sorry, guys. I'll watch it at some point.
It's really good.
Yeah.
Off without him. This revelation changes everything for him, because he realizes right then and there that no matter how much he hates himself for his actions, he matters. He's
you did good, man.
And in his own little way, he makes the world a better place. This inspires Hank to finally decide to fully embrace that side of him that seemed to be lost forever. The kid who just wanted to make fun inventions, to make the world a happier place. He dons his giant man costume, and with a new sense of purpose, he becomes a hero again. He saves civilians, stops petty crime, and the story ends with him giving a reassuring smile to the reader as he says,
I feel as if I've been given a second chance at everything. As if this is the beginning of a whole new way of life for Dr. Hank Pym, who matters.
I don't know where to begin with this story. Never have I read a comic that has resonated with me the same way this one has. Hank's whole story of being this creative individual who constantly wants to express himself but feels like he can't with the pressure of the world weighing down on him. It's some heavy stuff that I couldn't help but see a bit of myself in. And it's because of how much I found myself relating to the story that I genuinely felt so uplifted when the ending subverted my expectations and actually had Hank come out of it okay.
Yeah, thankfully Hank didn't do what Miss Marvel suggested that he did. It could have very easily led down that route, especially if the writer, whoever was handling the previous comic, was the one handling this epilogue.
When you're reading about this poor guy, the expectation is always that he's going to get worse before he gets better. Marvel writers don't like Hank, and more often than not, is he treated like an emotional punching bag. So when I saw this poor guy mentally broken at his lowest point, only to realize that he really, truly mattered to the world, I won't even lie, I started tearing up a little bit reading it.
I
It's
did
a
too,
thoughtful,
from you
emotional
talking about
story
it.
about mental health and self-expression that I did not expect to read in an issue of Age of Ultron of all
Right?
stories, but I am so glad I read it. Stories like this one and the ones I've talked about before really cement why Hank Pym is my favorite of Marvel's heroes. It's such a good read. Moving on, we arrive at what many consider to be the single best Ultron story ever written, Rage of Ultron. This comic right here is probably
Age, but
the
with
most
R now.
referenced story to ever feature the character. If you see any discussion
The
on
R-rated
forums,
Age of Ultron.
I mean, Age of Ultron in and of itself was already pretty dark. I can't believe what's about to happen here.
or
Goddamn.
Twitter talking about Ultron, I promise you that the example panels people will provide when discussing his characterization will be from this comic. And I can see exactly why. Rage of Ultron is an incredibly thorough character study meant to explore the complicated relationship between Hank Pym and his creation in a way that feels accessible to new readers. It's a one-off story that was released around the same time as the MCU Age of Ultron, and it acts as a very good self-contained narrative that tells you practically everything you need to know about its characters. Actually getting into Rage of Ultron, the story opens with a flashback showing a fight the Avengers had with Ultron back in
That's
Hank
America's
Pym's
ass.
Yellow Jacket era. During his fight, it seems that Ultron has the upper hand until Hank makes the decision to crash a Quinjet, injuring himself to make Ultron let his guard down. Ultron goes up to relish in his creator's death, and the two of them have an incredibly interesting back and forth.
Hello, Father. Did you come to kill me again? A narcissist upset with his progeny for not reflecting him closely enough? Or is it the other way around? Am I too true to the ugliness inside you?
All I've ever wanted was for you to find a way to cohabitate. To find a happy life.
You never cared if I was happy. You only cared about how I made you look.
Moments like this are what make Rage of Ultron such a good story. There is a deep understanding of both characters and what makes their dynamic so fascinating. Instead of there being constant action, the story often chooses to give us these still, quiet moments where we get to see their raw emotions on display.
Yeah, this really is just like the jumping on point for any new comic reader. And especially releasing after or during the same time as Age of Ultron, this makes a whole lot of sense to have this story out there. To just make sure that people know this deep connection that these two characters have with each other. And to gain a somewhat of an appreciation towards that.
After this great interaction, Hank continues on by telling Ultron that he really truly does love him deep down as a son, and we get this moment where Ultron is initially skeptical, but slowly realizes that his father
creation,
isn't lying. He lets down his guard, and that is when Hank's plan comes to fruition. With the help of Hawkeye, the Avengers attach Ultron to the Crash Quinjet, sending him to space. In the moments where Ultron struggles, he laments over his father's actions.
I also feel like sending people out into space isn't the greatest idea. Wasn't there one time where we sent Hulk out into space and that came to bite us in the ass?
Yeah, I mean, even earlier we sent Ultron out into space and he took over the entire species of robot people.
We need to find a better way to get rid of people.
He somehow lied to him, only to be told by Hank that he was telling him the truth. And with that, he's gone. We then cut to present day, where the Avengers are fighting a group of androids known as the Descendants. We see Hank, who monologues to himself about the idea of there being a god and a soul as he tinkers with a new device. He concludes to himself that there is no such thing as a god or soul, organic or artificial, and he uses his device to kill every member of the Descendants, later saying that he merely turned them off. And it is here where I must now
Hank has a little too much power for his own good sometimes. We've seen plenty of examples of this, but I don't know. Hopefully this is like post-epilogue Age of Ultron Hank, and he has more of a center to himself. You never know. This might be the start of something new for him.
voice
I
my
don't know
personal
where they fit.
issues
Yeah.
with Rage of Ultron. This is a good story, do not get me wrong. A great story, in fact. The art is beautiful, the writing for the most part is fantastic.
Say that again?
Yeah, Pastra. And I was watching this, I thought the same thing. I could not wait for this movie to be over. I made such a bad choice watching this.
To watch it. Yeah.
I watched this in cinema with friends.
Oh. At least you do it with friends.
Yeah, but it hurt everybody. And I was the one who convinced them to watch it. I am so sorry, guys. I failed you.
And it managed to give many new readers to Marvel's comics the opportunity to experience this character for the very first time in a way that feels very accessible. But with all that said, this story is not perfect, and this particular part is an example of that. Hank Pym has been badly mischaracterized here, and it continues through the entire story. Rage of Ultron is supposed to take place after the events of both Age of Ultron and Avengers
there you
AI.
go. Yeah, that's what we were wondering. Because, like, the way he was acting doesn't really seem like it. But,
Yeah.
or maybe trying to do, like, a reset on it, or maybe the writers just don't understand. It is still really hard, though, to get all of that comic book history of Hank's character throughout the years in just, like, this one comic run. Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
So condensing all of that down just means that it's not going to have as much meaning as it does to anybody who's read since the beginning or knows the history
I
of the
feel like that will
character.
forever be the
Yeah.
downside to having multiple writers take on a character, which is inevitable for something like Marvel, right? But yeah, you just will never always get perfect characterization all the way through.
It's hard too, because the way that art is perceived is very different depending on the person. It's very subjective. So somebody, maybe the writer of this did go back to see like Hank's character evolution, but he understood it in a different way than what others understood it as, or maybe what the authors previously that worked on his character meant for it to be understood as. It's hard to say.
Yeah.
Regardless, though, yeah. Immediately ask that question. Guess we're getting into it now.
And in those storylines, we see a completely different character than the one present here. You
Yeah.
already know about Age of Ultron, but quickly looking at Avengers AI, we see a redeemed, hopeful Hank who, after his revelation in
So
the
it
Age
is
of Ultron
continuation.
epilogue, has reprogrammed a Doombot to be an Avenger. And this Hank becomes so
Hey.
emotionally attached to this Doombot that he genuinely sees it as a friend. He is every bit the hopeful, ambitious Hank Pym that was set up in the story prior, and seeing him thrive in this way is really nice for a change. We then abruptly cut to
Right? Bro has been dragged through the mud the entire history of his comic run until now. Give him his moment to shine.
Rage of Ultron, a story that canonically takes place only 1 year later, and suddenly Hank has completely and totally regressed back into the depressed, insecure man he was before, now monologuing to himself about how he doesn't view AI as life. He picks a fight with the Avengers, straight up tells Vision to his face that he doesn't really think he's alive, and when asked to destroy the machine that he used to kill the Descendants, he just threatens to make another one. This is just not the same character, and it bothers me a lot, especially with how wonderfully written Hank was in the prior story we talked about. It really sucks too, because I feel like
It is just straight up a character regression for the sake of a story, which is unfortunate. I know what they were trying to do with introducing new readers, but at the cost of all the stuff that we've done for Hank over the years, yeah, it just kind of gets
That's
undone.
happened with characters that I really like, so I definitely can feel that pain.
this could have been avoided, and it would have made for an even better story than before. We have never gotten to see an interaction between Ultron and Hank after his change for the better. Imagine how interesting it would be to see a fully recovered Hank having to face his demons from the past and accept that he is not the person that Ultron is trying to make him out to be. That would would be something new and compelling that we have never seen before. But instead, Hank was basically just reset to how he was before, because no comic book character can ever have a meaningful change in their writing forever. The status quo must be maintained, and unfortunately for Hank, the status quo is him never being able to grow or change as a person. Bit of a tangent aside, the main plot of Age of Ultron begins once we learn what became of the Ultron that was sent into space all that time ago.
Yeah,
Turns out he crash landed on Titan, the birthplace of Thanos.
Oh, Titan. Isn't that the planet where they fought Thanos on in the MCU during Infinity War?
Where he proceeded to take over the entire moon and effectively become it. He makes his way to Earth, invading the planet with perfect robotic replicas of all the Avengers and spewing out this specially designed spore that infects all life and transforms them into machine. For a bit, the Avengers deliberate on what they plan to do to stop this onslaught, with Hank Pym eventually deciding to go to the source, meeting Ultron face to face and planning an ambush where the Vision could use his power to merge with him, taking control. The two meet in the center of the moon, with Ultron now sporting a new appearance resembling that of his father's Giant Man costume, complete with robotic antenna, and the two partake in another back and forth.
Hello, Father. Come to unburden yourself of the lie of unconditional love, to own your hatred.
I don't hate you. I am disappointed in you. You want to hurt people.
You don't want to hear that. Nobody wants to hear that from their parent.
I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed.
Oh, just kill me, please.
Yes, I do. And why did that end up being my primary motivation? Who created me to be this way? I spent years trapped in a cage processing that very question. Do you know what I discovered? Your memories. Memories of an ashamed father who never understood his son, a withholding mother who convinced the boy it was his fault, cruel children mocking him as they smashed his inventions, solitary birthdays spent in his lab, rejected by women for more self-assured, masculine men. Yes, I was there, incubating as confidence were casually betrayed by close friends for political and financial gain. A fetus formed in the depression of a founding Avenger showed no respect. A formless man constantly changing his identity in search of validation, desperate for acceptance, and the fury he felt at all those who refused to give it.
Holy shit, man. If I ever ran into a robot version of myself that just told it to me straight how sad and pathetic I was, I don't know how I'd fare. Not gonna lie. The truth hurts. And
it does, yeah.
Yeah, Hank really just needs a break. He doesn't need to be in any more comics. Just give him a happy ending, have him ride off into the sunset, and we could just imagine him living in paradise, being the man that he always wanted to be, you know?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I wish nothing but the best for this guy, but I guess suffering continues. The one above all has decided he cannot rest yet.
Yeah.
And when someone did love this sad man, he hated them all the more for it. For who could ever love you but a fool, Father? For now you see, my rage.
Bro, being that insecure that you can't even believe it when somebody says they love you is so relatable. Like, this must be too good to be true. I don't deserve this. Even after all this time, where you finally find somebody that appreciates you for who you are. Man, we truly destroy ourselves. This is insane.
You are your own worst enemy.
Oh, quite literally in this.
Body.
Yeah.
I'm the embodiment of what you truly want. To erase them all! The disingenuous politicking, the glad handing, the fraudulent smiles, writhing and cheating and manipulating. letting perception to gain favor. You hate mankind.
No. That's you, Ultron.
It is, but I am not Ultron. We
I'm you.
are Ultron.
We
You
are.
could never find your place in this world.
Wow. Oh, man. God. Heck, you have to stay strong, my dude. Please.
So you built me to destroy it. You never truly stop me because you want me to succeed.
This conversation basically puts into words everything that was implied through the subtext of previous comics. It's an interesting conversation that really hones in on Ultron's emotional side, with all of his human rage coming completely to the surface now, and any previous semblance of his robotic, calculated side being gone. This Ultron is at his wit's end. He's broken and angry. Years of rage and neglect from his father have made him reach the point he's at now, and he vents all of that rage at Hank, who has practically nothing to say in response. The emotional torment comes to an end when Hank and Vision's plan comes to pass, with Vision flying into Ultron and attempting to merge with him. At first, the plan seems to be going well, but Hank hears the cries of Ultron screaming out for his father to save him, and despite everything, despite the fact that Hank has claimed time and time again in this story that AI isn't life, despite all the horrible things Ultron has done, his maternal instinct takes over and he tries to save his son. That is when Ultron shows his true colors, revealing his cries to be nothing but a ploy as he pulls Hank in, using Vision's powers to merge himself with his own creator.
Oh my god. This couldn't have possibly gone any worse than it did.
What follows is the emotional climax where the Avengers fight the new, merged Ultron, trying their hardest to get through to Hank to convince him that he is not a monster, that Ultron is not what he has to be. And eventually, the words do get through to him. We see a flashback of Ultron's creation, the moment that everything seemingly fell apart.
They even have the old Ultron 1 design. Oh, it's so cute.
Where Hank laments his son, saying he was too broken, words he now realizes had always applied to them both. All of his humanity comes back to him at once, and in an emotional outburst, he flies into space where nobody can find him. The day is saved, but at a price. Hank Pym lost himself.
So we just lose Hank and Ultron at the same time? Oh, man.
That is, yeah, it's such a tragic conclusion for that. Batman, please! I am trying to watch video.
Batman is like, we are Batman. The insecurities that you harbor within yourself, Serby. I am the form of that. I know that you want to constantly bark when you're recording with Zero.
Imagine.
In merging with Ultron, and now that nobody knows where he's gone, he's presumed dead. A funeral is held in his honor, with Janet giving a speech about the man Hank was. Someone who was flawed, but was a hero nonetheless. Rage of Ultron ends with us seeing Ultron floating alone in space, with a human heart that continues to beat.
That's just the end of JoJo's Part 2. It's all the JoJo's reference, always has been. I appreciate it when autobiographies depict the person that they're writing about in this way. They have dreams, they have ambitions, they have goals, but they were inherently flawed, because everyone is. Not everybody is perfect. And oftentimes when it's like a self-authored autobiography, it makes them out to be a really, really good person. Which just makes the story not very intriguing. In this instance, I can appreciate Hank and his failings and whatnot, but still, valid point. We kind of already did this with Hank. I wish we had gotten more from him.
I can see where the writers would choose to ignore the character progression. Yeah. Because this story wouldn't work with it. But it's a compelling story, so I see the desire to want to like put it out there. But yeah.
It is intended for a very specific audience that doesn't know about Hank Pym, and to get like a fast track of what he became and his failings and whatnot. So yeah, I can appreciate it for both.
It's kind of
but
an
also
interesting almost alternate conclusion, Frank.
Alternate conclusion, yeah. It could have gone this
It's a
way.
sadder one.
It's one that I choose to ignore. I prefer the other one much more. But yeah.
Unfortunately, they didn't do it as an alternate version.
Oh no! So why?
This story really is something special. I may have my own issues with it because of how Hank was written for it to happen, but I can look past that for the most part just because of how much love went into it. You can clearly tell with every panel of the story that the writers and artists put their hearts and souls into it, and I find it hard to dislike what's there as a result. A really good story that has definitely earned its place as one of Ultron's best, even if it isn't my personal favorite.
And I think that is where we're gonna call things for today. I am dreading the next time we record and we find out what Hank becomes after this.
Yeah, what happens after this? I don't know.
You don't know, but at least you know that it's canon, right? To this one?
Yeah.
Oh, man. We'll see then, we'll see. But thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed, and we'll catch you in the next one.
Bye-bye.